The Art of Strategy, by Avinash K. Dixit and Barry J. Nailbuff. Introduction. Imagine for a moment that we're playing a little game. I've picked a number in my head, somewhere between 1 and 100. Your goal is simple: guess the number. If you get it right on the first try, I'll give you $100. Now, you and I both know the odds aren't great. 1 in 100. So, to make it interesting, I'll give you 5 guesses. And after each wrong guess, I'll tell you if you're too high or too low. The faster you get it, the more you win. A correct second guess gets you $80, then $60, $40, and finally $20 for the 5th guess. After that, the game is over. Ready? What's your first guess? If you're like most people, you probably just thought of the number 50. It's the logical choice. It splits the range in half and gives you the most information, no matter what I say next. It's the perfect engineer's approach to solving a problem. So, you say 50. And I say, too high. What's your second guess? Probably 25, right? Splitting the new range in half again. I say, too low. How about your third guess? Maybe 37? Too low. Fourth guess, 42? Too low again. All right, let's pause. This is your 5th and final guess. $20 are on the line. You know the number is between 42 and 50. That means it has to be 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, or 49. 7 options. Which one do you pick? Now, if you were playing against a computer that had picked a number at random, your strategy of dividing the interval in 2 would be flawless. But you're not playing against a computer. You're playing against me. And in this imaginary game, I'd rather keep my $100 than give it to you. So, think about it from my perspective. Would I ever have picked 50? Of course not. It's the first number almost everyone guesses. I'd be out $100 instantly. Would I have picked 25? Or 1? Or 100? No. I would have picked a number I thought you'd have a hard time finding. This is the very heart of what we're going to talk about today. It's the central lesson from a book that has quietly shaped the thinking of leaders, negotiators, and decision-makers for decades. The Art of Strategy by Avinash Dixit and Barry Nailbuff. It's a book that teaches you one profound, life-altering skill: how to see the world through the eyes of others. The secret isn't just about being smart. It's about understanding that every person you interact with, your boss, your parents, your friends, your rivals, is also a strategic player. They have their own goals, their own fears, and they are trying to anticipate your moves, just as you are trying to anticipate theirs. What if I told you that by the end of our time together, you'll not only understand why your final guess in our little game might be wrong, but you'll start to see these hidden games everywhere? You'll see them in why companies offer rebates instead of just lowering the price, why politicians seem to say the same things, and even why it was once a brilliant military strategy for a general to burn his own ships upon arriving at enemy shores. This isn't just a book summary. This is a guide to a new way of thinking. It's about learning that life isn't just a series of events that happen to you. It's a series of games that you can learn to play, and play well. So, back to our game. You have one guess left. You know the number is between 42 and 50. You now realize I've been trying to outwit you. What do you choose? Perhaps 49? It seems like a clever, slightly off-center guess. If you picked 49, I have to congratulate you for falling right into my final trap. The number I had in my mind was 48. You see, I anticipated that you would eventually figure out my strategy. I knew you'd realize I was avoiding the obvious numbers. So I led you down a path, and then used that very logic to mislead you one last time. To beat me, you would have had to be one step ahead of my thinking. You would have had to think, he thinks I'll think this way, so I'll do that. And that, right there, is the art of strategy. It's not just about your own moves, it's about the dance of minds. And today, we're going to learn the steps. Book summary. So, where do we begin our journey into strategic thinking? We start with the most fundamental rule, the one that governs everything else. The authors, Avinash Dixit and Barry Nailbuff, put it simply, Rule 1, look forward and reason backward. It sounds simple, almost like a proverb. But within that short phrase lies the power to untangle some of life's most complex situations. Most of us live our lives looking forward. We make a decision, then we see what happens, and then we make the next decision. A strategist does the opposite. They go to the end of the game first, figure out what will happen there, and then use that knowledge to work their way back to the present, making the right choice at every step. The perfect, and perhaps most tragic, illustration of someone who never learned this rule is good old Charlie Brown. Year after year, Lucy holds the football. Year after year, she promises him that this time, she won't pull it away. Charlie Brown stands there, at the beginning of the game. He has a choice, to run and kick, or to walk away. He looks forward and sees two possibilities. He either kicks the ball to the moon, or he lands flat on his back, staring at the sky. A strategist, however, doesn't stop there. They look forward to the next move. If Charlie Brown runs, the decision is no longer his. It's Lucy's. And what are her options? Let him kick, or pull the ball away. To reason backward, Charlie Brown has to put himself in Lucy's shoes. What does Lucy want? We all know the answer. She gets a perverse joy from his failure. So, from her perspective, pulling the ball away is always the better choice. Once he knows what Lucy will do at the end, the choice at the beginning becomes painfully clear. If he runs, he will end up on his back. Therefore, his only winning move is not to play. He should walk away. Of course, Charlie Brown never does. He's a triumph of hope over experience. But we can learn from his mistake. This simple cartoon holds the key to analyzing far more serious games. Imagine a businessman, let's call him Charlie, all grown up, who is approached by an entrepreneur named Fredo in a developing country with a weak legal system. Fredo has a brilliant idea. Invest $100,000 with me, he says, and in 1 year, I'll turn it into $500,000. We'll split the profits. You'll more than double your money. Charlie is at the first move. He can either invest or not invest. If he doesn't invest, the game ends. Nothing gained, nothing lost. If he does invest, the next move belongs to Fredo, a year from now. Fredo will have two choices: honor the contract and share the money, or abscond with the entire $500,000. To make the right decision today, Charlie must look forward and reason backward. A year from now, what will be in Fredo's best interest? With $500,000 in hand and a legal system that's unlikely to catch him, Fredo can choose between giving Charlie back $250,000 or keeping all $500,000 for himself. The choice is clear. He will abscond. Knowing this, Charlie sees that the path of investing leads directly to losing $100,000. So, his best move today is not to invest. This way of thinking, of mapping out the choices in a sequence, is what game theorists call a game tree, and the process of starting at the end and working your way back is the single most important skill for any sequential game, a game where players take turns. Let's try it on a more complex puzzle, one that played out on the TV show Survivor. The two tribes, Sukjai and Chue Gan, were faced with a challenge. There were 21 flags in a field. Each tribe, on its turn, could remove 1, 2, or 3 flags. The tribe that took the last flag won immunity. Suk Jai went first. They huddled up, discussed their strategy, and confidently removed 2 flags, leaving 19. Was this a good move? Let's look forward and reason backward. The end of the game is taking the last flag. If it's your turn and there are 1, 2, or 3 flags left, you can take them all and win. Now, reason backward 1 step. What if it's your turn and there are 4 flags left? If you take 1, you leave 3 for your opponent. They win. If you take 2, you leave 2. They win. If you take 3, you leave 1. They win. So, leaving your opponent with 4 flags is a winning move. 4 is the first key number. Now, reason back another step. How can you guarantee that you leave your opponent with 4 flags? You can do that if, on your turn, you are facing 5, 6, or 7 flags. For example, if you see 5 flags, you take 1, leaving them with 4. If you see 6, you take 2, leaving them with 4. If you see 7, you take 3, leaving them with 4. But what if you are facing 8 flags? If you take 1, you leave 7. Now your opponent can take 3, leaving you with 4. And you lose. If you take 2 from 8, you leave 6. Your opponent takes 2, leaving you with 4. You lose. If you take 3 from 8, you leave 5. Your opponent takes 1, leaving you with 4. You lose again. So, 8 is a losing number to be faced with. Which means, leaving your opponent with 8 is a winning move. The second key number is 8. Do you see the pattern? The key numbers are multiples of 4. A strategist wants to leave their opponent with 4, 8, 12, 16, or 20 flags. Let's go back to the start. The game begins with 21 flags. Suk Jai, moving first, could have taken just 1 flag. That would have left Chue Gan with 20, a key number, a losing position. From that point on, no matter what Chue Gan did, Suk Jai could have always brought the total down to the next multiple of 4. If Chue Gan took 1 flag from 20, leaving 19, Suk Jai would take 3, leaving 16. If Chue Gan took 2, Suk Jai would take 2. If Chue Gan took 3, Suk Jai would take 1. Suk Jai had a guaranteed path to victory from the very first move. But they didn't see it. They took 2 flags, leaving 19. They gave up their winning advantage on the very first turn. In fact, both tribes made mistakes throughout the game, passing the advantage back and forth. But in the end, it was Chue Gan that understood the final, most important key number, 4, and they won the game. This simple rule, look forward and reason backward, is incredibly powerful. But what about situations where you don't take turns? What about games where both players have to act at the same time, in ignorance of the other's choice? This brings us to one of the most famous and troubling ideas in all of game theory, the prisoner's dilemma. Imagine 2 partners in crime, let's call them Dick and Perry, are captured by the police. They are separated and put in different interrogation rooms. The prosecutor visits each one and lays out a deal. The deal is the same for both. Here's how it is, the prosecutor says. We have enough to convict both of you on a lesser charge, which will get you 2 years in prison. But we want a confession for the main crime. If you confess and your partner stays silent, you walk free. We'll use your testimony to put him away for 10 years. However, if you both confess, we don't need either of you to testify, and you'll both get 5 years. Finally, if you stay silent and your partner confesses, well, you'll be the one doing 10 years. Let's put ourselves in Perry's shoes. He's sitting alone, trying to figure out what to do. He can't talk to Dick. He has to anticipate Dick's move. He thinks, what if Dick stays silent? If I also stay silent, we both get 2 years. But if I confess, I walk free. So, if Dick is silent, I should confess. But what if Dick confesses? If I stay silent, I get 10 years. That's the worst possible outcome. If I also confess, we both get 5 years. 5 years is better than 10. So, if Dick confesses, I should also confess. Look at what just happened. No matter what Dick does, Perry's best move is to confess. Confessing is what the authors call a dominant strategy. It's the best choice, regardless of what the other player does. Of course, Dick is in the other room, going through the exact same logic. He also realizes that confessing is his dominant strategy. So, what happens? They both confess. And they both go to prison for 5 years. Here is the dilemma. If they had both just kept their mouths shut, they would have each only served 2 years. By each pursuing their own rational self-interest, they ended up in a situation that was worse for both of them. This isn't just a story about criminals. This game plays out everywhere. Think of 2 gas stations at the same intersection. Each one thinks, if I cut my price just a little, I'll steal all my rival's customers. But the rival thinks the same thing. So they both cut their prices, and they both end up in a price war, making less profit than if they had both just kept their prices a little higher. Or think about political campaigns. If one party takes a moderate, centrist position to attract swing voters, the other party feels forced to do the same to avoid losing that middle ground. The result is that both candidates sound almost identical, and voters with stronger views on either side feel ignored. This is the trap of the prisoner's dilemma. It shows us that when everyone acts selfishly, the outcome can be a disaster for the entire group. It raises a critical question. If we're all so often caught in these dilemmas, is there any way out? The author suggests that the answer lies in changing the game. The single-shot prisoner's dilemma is a hopeless trap. But in real life, we rarely play a game just once. We interact with the same people over and over again. Your gas station rival will still be there tomorrow. Your political opponent will be there for the next election. This shadow of the future completely changes the dynamic. In the 1980s, a political scientist named Robert Axelrod held a fascinating tournament. He invited game theorists from all over the world to submit computer programs that would play a repeated prisoner's dilemma game. Each program would be paired with every other program to play the game 200 times. Some of the strategies submitted were incredibly complex. Some were designed to be ruthless, always defecting. Some were forgiving. Some were random. But the winning strategy, submitted by a psychologist and mathematician named Anatol Rappaport, was one of the simplest of all. It was called tit for tat. Tit for tat strategy was this. 1. On the first move, cooperate. Be nice. 2. On every subsequent move, just do whatever your opponent did on the previous move. That's it. If they cooperated, you cooperate. If they defected, you defect. You reward cooperation and you punish defection, immediately and automatically. Tit for tat won the tournament not by beating its opponents in head-to-head matches, at best, it could only ever tie, but by encouraging mutual cooperation. It was successful because it embodied 4 key principles. First, it was clear. The opponent could easily figure out its pattern. Second, it was nice. It never initiated defection. It was never the first to cause trouble. Third, it was provocable. It never let a defection go unpunished. You couldn't mess with it without immediate retaliation. And fourth, it was forgiving. As soon as the opponent returned to cooperation, tit for tat immediately forgave the past and went back to cooperating too. It didn't hold a grudge. For a long time, tit for tat was seen as the ultimate solution to the prisoner's dilemma. But the authors point out a subtle and dangerous flaw. In the clean world of a computer tournament, there are no mistakes. But in the real world, misunderstandings happen. Imagine two countries playing a tit-for-tat strategy. Everything is going fine, with peaceful cooperation. Then, one day, a border patrol on one side accidentally fires a shot. The other side sees this as a defection and retaliates. The first side sees the retaliation as a new defection, and retaliates again. They get locked in a never-ending cycle of reprisal. Each action is a perfectly logical response to the last, but the cycle can lead to disaster. Think of the Hatfield-McCoy feud, or any long-running conflict where each side feels it is only responding to the other's aggression. Tit for tat is too quick to punish and not quick enough to forgive in the face of error. More successful real-world strategies often use something more like tit for two tats. They allow one defection to go unpunished, assuming it might have been a mistake. But if it happens again, the punishment is certain. This idea of changing the game, of not just playing the hand you're dealt but actively reshaping the rules and incentives, is one of the most powerful concepts in strategy. It leads us to the idea of strategic moves. A strategic move is an action you take in the present to change the game to your advantage in the future. The most common form of this is a commitment. Think about New Year's resolutions. Most of them fail. Why? Because the person who makes the resolution on January 1st, your calm, rational, future-oriented self, is playing a game against your future self, the one who is tired after a long day and sees a delicious piece of chocolate cake. In that moment, the future self has the final move, and temptation almost always wins. A commitment is a way for your present self to tie the hands of your future self. It's about making it impossible, or at least very costly, to back down later. The authors were involved in a television program that used a brilliant and terrifying commitment device to help people lose weight. The participants, who were all overweight, agreed to be photographed in nothing but a tiny bikini. The deal was simple: if they lost 15 pounds in 2 months, the photos would be destroyed. If they failed, the photos would be shown on national television. Suddenly, the choice was no longer between eating the cake and not eating the cake. It was between eating the cake and having my ex-boyfriend see me in a lime green bikini on TV and not eating the cake. The commitment changed the payoffs of the future game. The shame of public exposure was a far more powerful motivator than the distant health benefits of losing weight. And it worked. Almost all of them lost the weight. This idea of gaining power by limiting your own options is a recurring theme in strategy. The ancient Greek general Xenophon famously chose to fight a battle with his armies back against an impassable ravine. He deliberately took away their option to retreat. Faced with the choice of victory or death, his soldiers fought with a ferocity they might not have otherwise had. Similarly, when the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés arrived in Mexico, he scuttled his own ships. He sent a clear message to his men and to his Aztec opponents: there was no turning back. Commitments are powerful, but they are unconditional. You simply do them. But there are also conditional strategic moves, threats and promises. A threat is a promise to punish someone if they do something you don't want them to do. A promise is an offer to reward someone if they do something you do want them to do. The problem with both threats and promises is credibility. Why should anyone believe you? Think back to the story of Adam and Eve. God issues a threat: if you eat from the tree of knowledge, you will surely die. It's a clear threat. But the serpent whispers to Eve, you will not surely die. The serpent is questioning the credibility of God's threat. Why? Because carrying out the threat would be costly for God. He would have to destroy his own creation. As it turns out, the serpent was right. Adam and Eve were punished, but they weren't killed. God's threat wasn't fully credible. If you make a threat that is incredibly costly for you to carry out, your opponent may call your bluff. So, how do you make a threat or a promise credible? The authors lay out several paths. One is to stake your reputation. When President John F. Kennedy declared during the Cuban Missile Crisis that a missile launched from Cuba would be seen as an attack by the Soviet Union requiring a full retaliatory response, he was putting the reputation of the United States on the line. Backing down would have signaled weakness to the entire world. Another path is to create an automatic, irreversible process. This is the idea behind the terrifying doomsday machine in the movie Drive. Strangelove. The Soviets build a machine that will automatically trigger a worldwide nuclear holocaust if they are attacked. Because the response is automatic, there's no human weakness, no chance of backing down. The threat becomes completely credible. But this leads to an even more subtle and dangerous strategy: brinkmanship. This is the art of manipulating shared risk. Schelling, one of the pioneers of game theory, explained that the brink of war is not a sharp cliff, but a slippery slope. A credible threat isn't to say, if you do that, I will push us both off the cliff. A credible threat is to say, if you do that, I will move us closer to the edge, where the footing is loose and there's a chance we might both fall off by accident. You are deliberately creating a risk that something terrible might happen, a risk that is outside of your direct control. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy didn't threaten to launch a full-scale nuclear attack immediately. He established a naval quarantine of Cuba. This was the first step down the slippery slope. It created a situation where a mistake, an accidental shot fired, could escalate into a full-blown war. He was forcing both himself and Soviet Premier Khrushchev to face a shared risk. The goal of brinkmanship is to find a level of risk that is terrifying to your opponent, but still tolerable to you. Khrushchev looked over the edge, didn't like what he saw, and backed down. These strategic moves, commitments, threats, promises, are all about changing the game before it's played. But what if you don't have perfect information? What if you don't know what your opponent is really capable of, or what they truly want? This is where the game becomes one of information, of signals and screens. The guiding principle here is simple: actions speak louder than words. Anyone can say they're selling a high-quality used car. But if a seller offers a 6-month warranty, that's a different story. The action of offering a warranty is a signal. Why? Because it's far more costly for the seller of a low-quality car, a lemon, to offer a warranty than it is for the seller of a high-quality car, a peach. The seller of the lemon knows they'll likely have to pay for expensive repairs. The seller of the peach is confident the car will run fine. The difference in cost is what makes the signal credible. The seller is putting their money where their mouth is. This is the same reason why a college degree can act as a signal to employers. It's not just about the specific skills you learn. It's about the fact that surviving 4 years of rigorous academic work is generally easier and less costly for people who are intelligent, disciplined, and motivated than it is for those who are not. The degree signals these underlying qualities. Sometimes, it's the uninformed party that makes the move. A screen is a test set up by the player with less information to get the other player to reveal their type. Remember our friend Sue, from the beginning of our story? She wanted to know if her boyfriend was truly committed for the long haul. His words weren't enough. So she created a screen. She asked him to get a tattoo with her name on it. If he was truly committed, the tattoo was a romantic gesture. If he wasn't, it was an embarrassing liability for future relationships. The cost of the action was different depending on his true intentions. He refused, revealing his type, and she moved on. Of course, once you understand signaling, you also have to understand signal jamming. This is the art of trying to conceal information by mimicking the signals of another type. In poker, you can't just bet high when you have a good hand and low when you have a bad hand. Your opponents would figure that out instantly. You have to bluff. You have to sometimes bet high with a bad hand, and sometimes bet low with a good hand. You have to mix your plays to keep your opponents guessing, to jam the signal that your bet would otherwise send. And this brings us to one of the most counterintuitive ideas in strategy: the deliberate use of randomness. In some games, any predictable pattern can be exploited. Think of a penalty kick in soccer. If a kicker always aims for the goalie's left, the goalie will just start diving left every time. If the kicker alternates left, right, the goalie will figure that out too. The only way for the kicker to prevent the goalie from anticipating his move is to be unpredictable. He has to use a mixed strategy. He has to choose his shot randomly. But what's the right mix? 50-50? Not necessarily. The brilliant insight of game theory is that you should choose your mix in a way that makes your opponent indifferent between their choices. The kicker should choose a probability of kicking left and kicking right such that, from the goalie's perspective, diving left or diving right offers the exact same chance of success. When the goalie is indifferent, he has no way to exploit the kicker's choice. And amazingly, when professional soccer players and tennis players have been studied, their choices in these situations are astonishingly close to the optimal mix predicted by game theory. This need for unpredictability isn't just for sports. It's why the IRS uses random audits. If they published the exact rules for who gets audited, everyone would follow those rules just enough to avoid an audit, and cheat everywhere else. A small chance of a large penalty is a far more effective and efficient deterrent than a 100% chance of a small one. So far, we've explored games where players take turns, games where they act at the same time, games of cooperation, games of conflict, and games of information. But there's one final category we must touch upon: games of coordination. Sometimes, the problem isn't that our interests are in conflict. It's that we have a shared interest in coordinating our actions, but we can't communicate to decide on a course of action. The economist Thomas Schelling, who won a Nobel Prize for his work in game theory, posed a simple problem. Imagine you and a friend are supposed to meet in New York City on a specific day, but you forgot to agree on a time and place. Where would you go? Most people, after a moment's thought, converge on an answer: noon, at the information booth in Grand Central Station, or perhaps under the clock. Why? Because it's a focal point. It's not just that you think of it, it's that you know your friend will also think of it, and you know your friend knows that you will think of it, and so on. This convergence of expectations allows us to coordinate without communication. But what happens when we coordinate on the wrong thing? Look down at the keyboard you're using. The top row of letters spells out QWERTY. This layout was designed in the 1870s for manual typewriters. The goal was to place the most commonly used letters far apart to slow down the typist and prevent the keys from jamming. It was an intentionally inefficient design. Today, with modern computers, key jamming is not an issue. Engineers have designed far superior layouts, like the Dvorak keyboard, that are faster and more ergonomic. But we're stuck with QWERTY. Why? It's a coordination trap. Because all the keyboards are QWERTY, that's what we all learned to type on. And because we all learned QWERTY, manufacturers keep making QWERTY keyboards. No single person or company has an incentive to switch on their own. We're locked into an inferior standard because of a historical accident. This happens all the time. It's why we drive gasoline cars instead of potentially superior steam or electric ones, which lost out in the early 20th century due to a series of historical flukes. It's why changing social conventions can be so difficult. Sometimes, these coordination games have a tipping point. The great sociologist Thomas Schelling also developed a famous model of neighborhood segregation. He showed that even if every single person in a city is racially tolerant and would prefer to live in an integrated neighborhood, the city can still end up almost completely segregated. Imagine a neighborhood that is, say, 70% white and 30% black, and everyone is happy. Then, by random chance, a couple of white families move out and are replaced by black families. The mix shifts slightly. Some of the remaining white families, even if they are not prejudiced, might start to feel a little uncomfortable being in a shrinking minority. A few more might decide to move. As they do, the neighborhood tips, a chain reaction begins, and soon the neighborhood becomes almost entirely black. The same dynamic can happen in reverse. The surprising and tragic result is that individual, rational choices, even without any malice, can lead to a collective outcome that nobody wants. Breaking out of these coordination traps often requires a coordinated push, a change in public policy, a new law, or a bold move by a major player to establish a new, better focal point. Commentary. As we come to the end of our journey through the art of strategy, it's easy to feel a little overwhelmed. We've talked about game trees, prisoners, dilemmas, threats, signals, and focal points. It can seem like a toolkit for a cold, calculating, and manipulative view of the world. But I believe that's the exact opposite of the book's true lesson. The fundamental insight of game theory isn't about how to outsmart or trick other people. At its core, it's a profound lesson in empathy. Strategy isn't about being selfish, it's about understanding that the world doesn't revolve around you. It's about having the wisdom to step outside of your own perspective and see the world through another person's eyes, to understand their incentives, their knowledge, their fears, and their goals. A bad strategist only asks, "What should I do?" A good strategist asks, "What will they do in response to what I do?" But a great strategist asks, "What do they think I think they will do?" It's this ability to look at the intricate dance of expectations that separates true strategic masters from everyone else. This book is not a manual for how to win at all costs. It's a guide to understanding the structure of interaction. Sometimes, that understanding helps you find a way to compete more effectively. But just as often, and perhaps more importantly, it helps you find ways to cooperate. It shows you how to build trust, how to make credible promises, and how to escape the lose-lose traps that our own narrow self-interest so often sets for us. So how can you start applying these powerful ideas in your own life? Starting today, here are 3 simple practices. First, practice the backward look. The next time you face an important decision, whether it's a negotiation with your parents over curfew, a choice about where to apply to college, or a job interview, don't just think about your first move. Take 5 minutes and map out the future. Ask yourself, if I do this, what will they do next? And after that, what will be my best move? Forcing yourself to think just 2 or 3 steps ahead can radically change the decision you make today. Second, learn to identify the game. The next time you find yourself in a disagreement or a negotiation, pause and ask, what kind of game are we playing? Is this a one-shot game where I'll never see this person again, or a repeated game where my reputation matters? Is this a prisoner's dilemma, where we're both at risk of a bad outcome? Or is it a coordination game, where we both want the same thing but just need to get on the same page? Just giving the situation a name can clarify your thinking and reveal new paths forward. Third, always find your BATNA. Before you enter any negotiation, clearly define your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What will you do if you simply walk away? That alternative is the true source of your power. It's not about bluffing or being aggressive. It's about knowing, with quiet confidence, what you will do if the other side doesn't meet your essential needs. Seeing life as a series of games doesn't make it trivial. It does the opposite. It makes it more meaningful. It reminds us that we are not just passive observers of our lives, but active players. We have choices. We have agency. We can understand the rules, we can anticipate the future, and sometimes, if we are wise and creative enough, we can even change the game for the better, not just for ourselves, but for everyone playing. That was a summary of The Art of Strategy by Avinash Dixit and Barry Nailbuff. We've touched upon the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary is like looking at a travel brochure. It can show you the beautiful pictures, but it can't replace the feeling of actually being there. The real magic of this book happens when you read it yourself. It's in the quiet moments, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with a problem in your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see every interaction in your daily life. A link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know that these explorations are making a difference, and it ensures you won't miss our next dive into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.